is a revolution on in Iran right now. And at the forefront are women who are refusing to let men decide what they do anymore. It started off when a young woman was killed because her hair was showing under her hijab. It's followed with thousands of women now hitting the streets, removing their hijabs, cutting off their hair, chanting slogans like "death to the dictator" in the face of the dictator. They're truly revolutionaries. These protests are now in their 11th day and are in response to the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who died on September 16th in custody after being picked up by the morality police. The morality police has now been designated as a terrorist organization in the United States. The protesters' demand is simple. They're asking for an overturn of laws that mandate the hijab for all females from the age of 9 or for the code to be discretionary, a law that has been in place since 1979. The protests have been termed as rioting and wickedness, and Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi has now laid down the diktat. But 80 cities is where the protests have been going on, and the number of lives being claimed is only growing. To speak on this movement, I'm joined now by Iranian activist Mariam Memarsadeghi. She's joining us from the United States. Mariam, thank you so much for speaking with us here on Beyond the Headline. Now, this is not the first time there have been protests in this regime. But how do you think these protests are different? Are we seeing history in the making?
Well, the past protests, particularly in the last 5 years or so, were preludes or laying the groundwork for this revolution. And many of the slogans we hear today, we have heard before. What's different this time is the level of mobilization, the level of participation, and that people from all walks of life, worldviews, lifestyles throughout the country are united. And the same for the diaspora across the world. Iranians are protesting in one voice against the totality of the regime and calling for regime change. And it's wonderful to see that globally, celebrities, athletes, journalists, people from every country really in the world are supporting the people of Iran in their aspiration for democracy.
What about the kind of response, Mariam, that we have seen from this regime? Because they seem to have responded with an extreme crackdown. There's been no official statement from the government, but their morality police has been let loose and brutality has just been mounting. How do you look at the kind of response that we've seen from them?
Yes, well, nobody expected the regime not to be brutal. The Iranian people, however, in this revolution have been very creative and very resilient in what they call honorable vandalism. Taking down, destroying surveillance cameras that are throughout the cities, cyber hacking, destroying the vehicles of the security officials, setting fires, blocking streets. So the regime undoubtedly was always going to opt for violence. But what's different here is that the people's response has been extremely strong and determined. And when we see security forces coming to beat a woman, for example, others gather and protect that person. And the level of support and solidarity among the people is unprecedented.
It is bravery in the extreme to stand in front of a dictator and say down with the dictator. But you know, Mariam, you spoke about how support is pouring in from the world, and international organizations are commenting. The morality police has been proscribed, as we mentioned earlier. But how does that really help these people who are in the line of fire right now and continue to protest? What more can the world do to give actual and really solid support?
The sanctions at this point, I mean, although they're welcome, they're not going to make the difference that we need. The most important thing is for the United States government to walk away from the nuclear negotiations in Vienna, because those negotiations are aiming at a deal that would hand the regime billions of dollars. And we have seen before with the JCPOA agreement that was brokered by the Obama administration, when this regime gets its hands on money, it massacres people. It was responsible for the killing of hundreds of thousands of people in Syria while that deal was in place. And this time, if it's handed money, it will use it to repress the Iranian people more than it ever has. So it's imperative that the United States and other democracies like India recognize that this is a historic opportunity to get on the right side of history, stand with the Iranian people, and the result will be a democratic government that will be a force for peace in the Middle East and the world.
You know, Mariam, the hijab has become a topic of controversy and debate in India as well. And I wanted your view on this, because while in Iran, the fight is to remove the hijab and not be forced to wear the hijab. Here in India, there is a court case in the top court of the land where girls are saying, we want the right to wear our hijab when we go to school. How do you look at this debate? Is the hijab a matter of choice, or is it forced down, or does it depend on the situation?
Well, for me personally, I see hijab as something that is imposed on girls. And so if it's imposed on girls by their families, it cannot be considered a free choice. If a woman, after she's 18, wants to wear the hijab, then it's a matter of her religious freedom. But under 18 years of age, sending children to school with hijab, this cannot be justified under the argument of choice or even religious freedom, because that child has a right to grow up and decide her religion and then decide how she's going to appear in public.
All right, thank you for your view, Mariam. Clearly, it's a complex issue, and I'm glad we've managed to put the focus on the fight of the brave women of Iran.